Coming up on today's episode.
With the best will in the world, a lot of this work has got to come from schools, and they are under so much pressure that they have never felt before. What I would love to see, first of all, is that teachers just teach. That they aren't mental health advisors, that they aren't social workers, that they aren't everything under the sun, and they can concentrate on education. But then, to support that, we need the mental health, we need the social work, we need the other opportunities. I mean, I always laugh with the HS2 that was supposed to link the north and the south stops halfway up the country. So we're like, what about the rest of the north? Do we not exist up here?
Welcome to The Changemakers, a new podcast shining a light on the people who dedicate their careers to changing the lives of others. I'm Lydia Parkin.
And I'm Claire Edwards.
We're both former journalists who now work in the third sector.
In this podcast, we will talk to society's fixers, menders, mopper-uppers and fighters about why they do their job, what they see in their work and why it matters. This is a commentary on our world and the lives of the often unsung heroes within it, who can only do their work because members of the public choose to support them through donations or fundraising activity.
To them, their job may just be that, their job. But to us, it's remarkable what they do and achieve every day. Their stories deserve to be heard.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of The Changemakers. Things will be a little different this episode because my esteemed co-host Lydia is currently on maternity leave following the birth of her beautiful baby. She is quite rightly focusing on her newborn and all the lovely cuddles and lack of sleep, and therefore you've just got me for the next few weeks. All is not lost though, because we have a brilliant guest for you. Our first with a British Empire Medal for services to young people in North Tyneside, and only a few weeks ago she was rubbing shoulders with the good and the great at the King's coronation. Today's changemaker is Katrina Moffat. Katrina has had an outstanding career working in education and tackling inequality in opportunities. The UK has one of the lowest social mobility rates compared to major EU countries. A socially mobile country offers equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of whether your parents are rich or poor. In England alone, 1 in 3 children are living in poverty, and by the age of 3, poorer children are estimated to be, on average, 9 months behind children from wealthy backgrounds. Despite only 7% of people going to private schools, a disproportionate number of people in top jobs within medicine, journalism, law and our government went to a private school. This is what Katrina is striving to change. I first met Katrina when we worked at Villas Park Educational Trust, which is a social mobility charity that works with teenage children from disadvantaged backgrounds such as being from a single parent family or having parents who haven't been to university. You'll hear us mention the organisation in this episode. Now she works for North Tyneside Trust, working with schools dotted around the area, which is northeast of Newcastle. But that's not all. Katrina has also been a volunteer for the Girl Guides for the last 18 years, and she's an enormous advocate for their mission too. We had such a good, thorough conversation exploring these two areas, while linked with her desire to enable young people to achieve their potential, do so in very different ways. So we have split this conversation in two. For part 1, we delve into social mobility, and in part 2, we'll chat all things girl guiding. Strap in, she's an incredible woman and I can't wait for you to meet her. Without further ado, over to this week's changemaker, Katrina. Katrina, thank you for coming along today and welcome to the Changemakers.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Can we start with where it all began for you? What was it like growing up for you, and can you see how it influenced where your career moved to? I'm guessing you're from North Tyneside.
I'm not.
I actually don't know that.
No.
No.
So I grew up in West Cumbria. So quite a small town, really, and like a lot of places in West Cumbria, there wasn't a lot to do. So the opportunity for me to go to university was one that I grabbed with both hands. And I'm first generation, so nobody else in my family had been to university, so it was a brand new experience for me and for my family. So I moved to Newcastle and went to Northumbria University and decided that from there I was never going back to West Cumbria. absolutely love Newcastle as a city, and that has actually shaped a big part of what I've done work-wise. And then sort of my career has been in and around education. So really fortunately, um, worked with young people with special needs in schools, went on to work for Northumbria University in student recruitment, which is probably where a lot of the influences come from, and then sort of moved on to the role I'm doing now via Villiers Park, but moved to North Tyneside in around about 2004, possibly. So it's sort of on the edge of it's very different to Newcastle because we're a kind of a bit of a place where you've got the coast on one side, which is quite an affluent area, and then sort of the more working kind of areas like the shipbuilding areas, the Wallsend and North Shields. And obviously we're then obviously quite close to Newcastle, so so it's a real mix when you look at sort of the demographics of North Tyneside.
And did you have, just jumping a little bit back to your childhood in Cumbria,
Yes.
as an adult and someone who's now worked in education and social mobility for a number of years, you're familiar with the simple fact that where you grew up would have reduced your opportunities in life, the fact that you were first generation going to university. Did you have any sense of that as a young person? Did you feel the barriers?
I don't think I did. I think my parents were quite positive about whatever my choices were going to be. And I think from an early age, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. So there was always an element of I would be going to university. So I didn't see it as being a problem at the time. But then, like I say, my dad, bless him, drove me to various universities to have a look. Um, that wasn't a problem, that he would make time to do that. So and school was always of the opinion that you can go to university, you can get a job, and that was sort of even pre social mobility and widening participation. So I think actually it would never have occurred to me that I might have been in a position where those opportunities weren't promoted to me. So I do think I'm quite lucky from that side of things, definitely.
And when did that change then, your kind of awareness of the barriers that face young people? And you sort of mentioned just before that perhaps it was when you were working in student recruitment that began to
Yeah.
kind of drive your passion for working with young people.
And I think that was definitely the point where it actually all became quite obvious, and it was at a point when aim higher was in place from being put in place from the government. So there was this drive to have 50% of young people were going to go to university. So there was a lot of money coming in from the government with a real drive from universities. And I worked for Northumbria University, which was former polytechnic, so its natural base was probably the students who would come to vocational courses as opposed to your Russell Group universities. But even then, when we were doing the outreach activities, it was really clear that you've got some students who absolutely would never have thought of going to university because, and this was before it really cost the level that it costs now, because they never thought of it because their parents had never thought of it, and it was about changing a mindset at that point, which is incredibly hard, because if you've had generations of young people whose parents or and grandparents were working on the shipyards or in those areas, then the natural way to go is you go out to work, and that is still an absolutely viable option for a lot of young people. But then, as well as that, though, it was about raising those aspirations and saying, well, you could do that, but you could also do this and then go back to that field at possibly a higher level. You could go in as a manager, or you can do HR management, or all the different things that could come with a degree option. Um, so I think that's really where it started to kick in. And like I said, in and around Newcastle, North Tyneside, there's a lot of areas where you do have a slightly higher demographic of disadvantaged students. Um, so yeah, so it was that was when it first became clear to me that there was a lot of work to be done around this.
And talking about social mobility there, in your former roles, you've worked directly with young people, haven't you, as mentors? Can you tell us about someone that you've supported in your career and what challenges they face? What are the sorts of barriers that are preventing equal opportunities in life for young people?
When we were working at Villas Park, that programme brought to light just how brilliant some of our young people are. Um, so I remember working with George. George was a phenomenal mathematician. I mean, brilliant. But he comes from a slightly more disadvantaged area. I believe, if I remember rightly, his mum was a single parent. Um, it's a standing joke if you know how you have Facebook Facebook groups that are around sort of local areas. I think it's a standing joke that where he lived was one of the dodgiest parts of the world to be living. But he was a phenomenal mathematician, and he took all the opportunities that Villas Park offered. And working with him, he really was trying so hard um, to really put himself in a position where he would be able to have the best career possible. And I mean, I was heartbroken on the day that he got his exam results because he I think he was interviewed for Oxford and or Cambridge, I can't remember, and didn't get through. But then his next choice was Warwick, and he missed it by, I don't know, a grade, and didn't get through there again. And he went on. He's still gone on and done phenomenal things with his maths, and he is a brilliant young person. But it's still a worry that actually what do our young people have to do to get these high flying places. And I know that's not like the best case study because it kind of shows that he didn't get what he wanted, but he is doing incredibly well, and will definitely have a phenomenal career. But at the same time, there was that bit where did the system let him down because he missed by one grade getting into a top university for maths.
Do you think George would have been where he is now, or even got as far as he did without the support you gave or that Villas Park gave?
I think I think he would have still been wanting to do it, um, because he was of a mentality that was determined. Whether he would have gotten as far, because that applying to Oxford and Cambridge is a challenge in itself, and you do need that additional support for that kind of thing, and kind of helping him realized that he could be applying for these top universities, then absolutely that kind of support's invaluable to students, because it's the kind of support that your private school student would get regardless. So yeah, he wouldn't have gotten that level of support if it just through the school.
Yeah, that's it. That's the difference, isn't it? So moving to North Tyneside specifically, where you're working with the North Tyneside Trust,
Yeah.
can you paint me a picture of what it means to be socially immobile in this area? What are young people experiencing, and how and why is it holding them back?
I think one of the key things is information, and if you can't get the information out to those who are the key influencers, so it is your teachers and it's your parents and even the grandparents, um, it's really hard then to sort of really establish like that basis where they can go and find what's available to them. But I think, and I do think COVID has had a massive impact on something here, is it's the opportunities as well. It's really hard to get work experience, or it's really difficult for young people to get onto um, some youth type programs because either the funding's not there for them or the people aren't there for them anymore, or it's oversubscribed because there's such a demand for things. So without those opportunities, it is incredibly difficult to break down the barriers. They're going to really struggle to then find or want to find jobs outside of their really close neighborhood, or something that's only like a short walk away, or somewhere where they can access without any real challenge. So those are some of the issues that I see in and around North Tyneside. And what I always laugh at as well is this whole idea that there's a river between Newcastle and Sunderland, and effectively Newcastle and the rest of the country. Crossing that river is like crossing a desert sometimes. Why would you ever want to do that? That's just ridiculous. But that's where I always loved the idea of what we were doing at Villas Park, because we would take them down, and we would take them on the train down to Villas Park. So they had that public transport experience. They then had to see a different part of the world. And I think that's, again, it comes back to those opportunities. We need to, some of the smallest opportunities can be huge, can make a huge difference. Yeah. I don't know if I answered all the question then.
I think you did. And I mean, the geography is an interesting one, isn't it? Because in some of the areas where there's the sort of lowest levels of people going on to higher education or earning less are the places that are cut off geographically or further away from London. And that is a consideration, isn't it? That feeling, that sort of sense that even just crossing the river
Yeah.
is something that a lot of them don't do. They don't leave that area. Like, why is that, do you think?
I think it's a bit historical, because once upon a time, the likes of Wallsend and North Shields were huge hubs. They were their own little towns in a bigger city. So why would you have to? Because everything had in days gone by, you could do your local shopping in the local town and you wouldn't have to go any further. But obviously there's been the decline of the industry in North Tyneside. And with that has come with the decline of the little town centres. And although they're putting a lot of money back into sort of the regeneration of these, it hasn't really, side of things hasn't developed. But the mindset of a lot of people is, well, I've still got my corner shop or something. Or we've actually got, really fortunately, a lot of quite big organisations who have set up in and around North Tyneside. So again, if you can work 10 minutes up the road and you've got enough amenities on the corner to get to do what you need, then you don't think about going across the water to do anything. So yeah, it might be football related as well. So you might not want to go to Sunderland. But yeah, I think a lot of it is based on what they have learned from parents.
Yeah.
So it's changing generations of experiences.
And you've worked in this field for a number of years, and a lot of the recent data shows that inequality is worsening in the UK. For example, more children pre-COVID were living in poverty than 10 years before that, and it's risen most in the northeast. And then COVID has exacerbated this. So what is your view on how things are right now for the young people you're working with? Are they getting better, worse, the same?
With the best will in the world, a lot of this work has got to come from schools, and they are under so much pressure that they have never felt before. And they're not funded sufficiently. So yes, you'll have schools that get pupil premium, and the numbers of pupil premium students in schools is increasing year on year at the moment. But then you've also got the ones who are on the edge, increasingly so now because of sort of the cost of living crisis, and not all schools have the capacity and the funding to be able to support those young people. So when school resources are stretched to the absolute max, then they aren't then able to provide as many opportunities as they would do. And this is something that the trust does. So we try to help our schools provide additional activities and various different things that the young people would benefit from. So for example, we might be offering something like work experience type programs, like the TICE program's a wonderful one. And without the trust supporting those activities, the schools would never be able to put them on, because their priority is teaching, which is what you would expect. But But then you've also got the problem with things like transport. So if the school did want to put on a trip, then they might have funding for something, but then the transport costs are just ridiculously increasing. So there's a lot of challenge in and around providing those cultural capital moments in schools. Um, that if you don't get it in from your parents, the schools are the next best place to get it from, and we can't do it. Um, and that's heartbreaking at the moment. Just as a governor, because I'm governor for a high school and I'm governor for a primary school, and we look at sort of what we've been able to provide over the years and what we're able to provide now, and the little trip to Rising Sun Park around the corner for a coach could cost something like £600.
Wow.
The school doesn't want to ask the parents because they're struggling in a lot of cases. They don't have the funding themselves, so that trip gets cut. And that's taking a young person to something like that is starting the opportunities of social mobility. They've been out, they've seen something different. But without that, where do we start with social mobility if we can't provide it in school?
So what you're saying really is, obviously you mentioned that you think there's a rise in children needing people premium, and parents are struggling, so you can't ask them for help, and the schools are struggling. So actually the effect is coming both ways, isn't it? You've got the pressure on the parents, and the pressure on the schools is exacerbating the problem from both
Absolutely.
areas.
Yeah. And how do you fix that? I mean, ultimately a lot of it is going to come down to funding. That is. But on the flip side as well, you have to have people who will provide those opportunities as well. And those are becoming less and less because those opportunities need funding and income, and so it's a real struggle. It's a kind of a vicious circle. Is if we can't get people out there to visit these places, then they're going to close down, and then we can't get them out there, and then you end up with generations of young people just, I don't know, loitering on the streets. They don't loiter on the streets very often, but those opportunities don't exist. So what do we do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer.
No, I absolutely don't know the answer either. But I'm really pleased that I do work for an organisation that is still trying to, through the schools, provide those opportunities.
Yeah.
So we are able to provide transport bursaries. We do, like I say, we offer funding to the schools to provide various different networks and opportunities that young people can tap into. Our World of Work programme is phenomenal in introducing young people to different employers that they may never have met previously, and just opening their eyes to what might be available out there. So that's really key to it as well, is developing those networks for young people as well.
Can we talk about you and the North Tyneside Trust a little more? On their website, the North Tyneside Trust say they're improving education and life chances for young people. How are they doing that, and what is your role within that day to day?
So I'm the project manager, which basically means I probably do almost everything. So I do finance, I do marketing and comms, I do fundraising, I organise events, I manage the customer, the CRM system. So yeah, it's a jack of all trades kind of job. But what is brilliant because of it is I have an oversight of what's going on in the schools. So you do see where the demands are and where the pressures are. And actually, one of the loveliest things that we do as a trust is we host the annual Star Awards. Currently, what I'm in the process of pulling together at the moment, and this is a celebration of the non-academic achievements of our young people, and we have 12 different categories ranging things like achievement and breakthrough and useful and kind, and just, for want of a better word, that it's kind of the fluffy ones. But what it allows us to do is recognize what the young people are actually doing and putting their time and effort into, and really being able to celebrate that. And naturally, because of we've got 44 schools in the trust, that range from the coast to like Wallsend and Killingworth, and they run from nursery right the way through to sixth form. So we will hit in all of that young people who will be disadvantaged, who don't have the opportunities, who might just be the ones that get on at school and just do it. And it's an absolute joy to be able to celebrate what they do. And again, it's that cultural capital that if we can give them an opportunity to come to an awards ceremony, they may not win, but they'll be recognised for their achievement. They've had an evening out in a glitzy. We're hosting it at St James's Park this year, so obviously that to a lot of young people is like the hallowed ground and everything like that. But if that then triggers something in them that says, well, actually, I was recognised for my fundraising, I was recognised for my volunteering, that then leads on hopefully to something else. So yeah, so it's a very varied job at the trust, but we do have the opportunity to see a lot of how we impact the young people.
What do you think is the most impactful work that you're doing at the trust?
At the moment, I would say without a doubt, it is our work at the World of Work.
Tell me more about it.
We have 2 World of Work leads, and then I kind of tag on in various places, who go out to schools from the littlies right up to the sixth forms and deliver either workshops and activities or mock assessment centres or mock interviews. And if you think we've had, particularly our high school students have had 2 years, 3 years of really disjointed education. There was a good couple of year groups that didn't have work experience, won't have interacted with anybody for a year outside of Zoom. So the World of Work project, yes, it introduces our young people to career opportunities and what's available out there, but it's back to giving them those basic skills of talking to somebody who you've never met. I mean, it has been quite challenging at times because you get some of them who come in the door who are absolutely terrified and do not want to sit down and do not want to be interviewed by anybody, even though we keep telling them it's not real. It's fake. Nothing's going to happen as a result of this. But when you get them to sit down and they come out and said, "Oh my God, it was brilliant," and there's a shift in their confidence, there's a shift in their mindset, and you hope that what that then does is gives them that little bit more confidence when they talk to somebody else, or when they do go for their first interview, they've just got a little bit more of something behind them that will help them get on. Because again, it comes back to that social mobility, in that we do want these young people to be going out there and getting brilliant jobs. And those brilliant jobs will always start with an interview of some description. So they do need to have those basic skills, which hopefully the World of Work project is providing them.
That's another great example, isn't it, of a barrier that you may not even consider, that if you go to a private school, you're likely to have that sort of interview lesson, and learning is going to be a key part of the support you get through your education.
Absolutely.
And okay, so you might have your student from a school in North Tyneside get an interview, and you might have a student who had a private education get the same interview. And the simple fact that that person has had more coaching will mean that they will do better in that interview than the person who hasn't had that same support. And so the problem carries on. And I think it's those nuances and kind of education experience that people may not even really consider are holding people back, even if they get to the point where they're able to get an interview.
Absolutely. And it used to be, we used to laugh because sometimes when I was looking for jobs when I was younger, it was a case of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And you don't really want that to be true, but actually realistically, if you've got a private education, the chances are your parents will know somebody who can support you with getting work experience, with talking to you about things. And that's not always the case when it comes to sort of the more disadvantaged students. They might have parents who are in work, but their colleagues and friends might not feel confident enough to share those experience and talk. So it's wherever we try to fit these opportunities in wherever we can, so that it is about building up the confidence and giving those young people as much of an edge as we can. I mean, it's not all bad news. I mean, we do have some students who are absolutely high flyers, and one of the things the trust is working on is raising awareness around apprenticeships, and what can be done. And I genuinely see this as being the next sort of challenge point, because trying to get onto a degree apprenticeship is like trying to get into Eton. It's ridiculous. Um, but what we've been able to do through the trust as well is capture some information about former students who have gone on and excelled in their apprenticeships. And I mean, I've got to admit, there was one girl I was talking to, I was completely jealous, because she's got a phenomenal job. She's half my age and she's flying. And I just think, oh God, if I'd had that opportunity, I would have so be taking that. But again, what we need to be doing is supporting the parents and the teachers and the young people to find these opportunities. Not doing it for them, but making sure that they know where this information is and what they can do. And then if it comes to interviews and mock assessment centres, can we provide the support that will help them, just give them that little bit of edge?
And looking at, I mean, you mentioned Villas Park, who are a charity as well. You're working for a charity now who are funded by a few grants, it seems, but also primarily through agreements through your partner schools in North Tyneside. And we know it's a really challenging time for schools financially. How do you personally reflect on the fact it is charities working with schools to make this change?
Yeah. Why is it charities working with schools to make this change? Why isn't this embedded into, well, it is embedded into schools as it is. The unfortunate thing is the funding isn't embedded into schools. And yeah, how, I mean, I always laugh when Michael Gove talks about levelling up, but how do we level up? It's without actually making significant investment in the schools beyond just the curriculum. I mean, the money for the curriculum's not even there. So if the money for the curriculum's there, there's definitely no money there for all the additional things that really support education. Um, it shouldn't be down to charities to do this, but the unfortunate thing is that it is. And because of the cost of living and because of COVID and whatever else is happening in the world, even those charities are struggling to support the schools, because they're fighting for a smaller pool of funding from themselves. And so, yeah, I think for years we've talked about higher education, aim higher, widening participation, social mobility, but every time it looks like we're on track to achieve something, then that money gets cut, because you're doing well. Clearly, you don't need the money. Well, actually, no, we're doing well because the money is there. If you take it away, then who's going to support it? So yeah, it is a horribly challenging time, but there are still people and there are still charities who see this as being one of the most important things, and and I'm really proud that that's where I work.
So you touched on there the government, and in recent years of politics, the Tories have had a range of social mobility programmes, from your sort of northern powerhouse to your current levelling up agenda. What is your perception on the government's approach to social mobility? And do you feel that addressing social inequality is at the top of their agenda, which they say it is?
I don't think it is. I think it pays lip service to a topic that is it will continue to rumble on, and I think they give a nod to it with a new idea. I mean, one of the things I think irritates me is that aim higher was working, and then they stopped it, and then they created a new version, and then they created a new version, and then they create a new version without taking anything from. There's no lessons learned in it. And I think there are parts of leveling up which we do need. So we need the investment in business, we need infrastructure, but at the core of everything that we need are the young people, because they are the next generation. And then their children will be the next generation. And unless we can solve that and give those young people the opportunities, then levelling up, or whatever it's going to be called in the future, will never actually work, because we need our young people to feel empowered. We want them to have the jobs that they can do, and it's generally said that the vast majority of jobs that will be around in 10 years time don't exist now. So we don't know what we're creating jobs for, but we can create young people with the skills and the knowledge and the attributes that an employer would want in the future. And without that, then it doesn't matter how much business you put up here, because there won't be anybody comfortable and confident enough to do it. So I do genuinely believe that the young people should be at the heart of what the government are planning.
And what would that look like to you? What could they come out and say tomorrow that involves young people that would make you go, yes, this is a change I want to see?
What I would love to see, first of all, is that teachers just teach, that they aren't mental health advisors, that they aren't social workers, that they aren't everything under the sun, and they can concentrate on education. But then to support that, then we need the mental health, we need the social work, we need the other opportunities. And I think as well, alongside that, and to an extent, up in North Tyneside and in the northeast, we are working on this, is working with employers to be able to provide those links and those opportunities, so that we have extracurricular activity available to young people, and not just to the families who can afford it. It should be available to anybody, so that, yeah, it doesn't matter if you don't have the extra £10 a week to pay for whatever. That shouldn't matter. You should be able to go to an extracurricular activity if that's what you want to do. So yeah. So I think fundamentally, I think there's a shift needed in education, and then the services that support it, and then bringing in those opportunities. And I mean, I'm under no illusions. It's never going to happen overnight, but I genuinely don't even think that some of the way that we're going is even in the right direction. I mean, yeah. I mean, I always laugh with the HS2 that was supposed to link the north and the south stops halfway up the country. So we're like, what about the rest of the north? Do we not exist up here?
So on their Levelling Up website, it currently states that talent is spread across the whole of the UK, but opportunity is not. We're changing that.
Sorry, that was a very cynical laugh there. Yeah,
That is your response, though, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, it is. I think because I remember. Oh, it was. I think that there must have been an opportunity to bid for some levelling up money, possibly before Christmas. And actually, when you look at what the money is being spent on, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I did look at it. I've got some of the things that I looked at the map that they have on their website. They are funding electric buses and rapid chargers. That's one of the projects. They are securing the future of two important cultural assets: the Grange Market and Old Eldham Square.
Yep.
There wasn't a lot.
No, no. And it begs the question, though, doesn't it? It's like, so has the northeast just not put in bids for the right things, or are we? Or is the money just decided, no, it's not going up there? But I mean, I have to admit as well, that I don't know what the money was earmarked for, but when you talk about levelling up, do we really need to invest however many millions in Granger Market? I mean, it's a lovely old building, but should that be the priority of the national government or the local government? So yeah, there's some questions around how it's being spent realistically.
What do you think the public perception is of social mobility? Do you think people have any idea about what it is, what it means, what the impact is of reduced opportunities for young people?
I honestly don't think, if you didn't work in and around education or the businesses and the sort of the services that support education to something, or are very specifically involved in social mobility, there's no way you would know about it and what it is. I don't think it helps that we call it like social mobility, to be fair, because that just makes it sound like something that the government are putting out there, isn't it?
What does it mean? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if I talk to my dad, he wouldn't know what social. I don't think he would know what social mobility was about. And actually, if you try to define it, it's incredibly difficult to define in one way. Because I do think as well, to be socially mobile, yes, it has an element that relates very specifically to trying to make sure that people have got opportunities. But those opportunities can also be, as I said before, making people getting used to using public transport instead of being ferried around. So that might be the tiniest little part of it all. So I think because it has so many different parts, it is incredibly difficult to define and to nail down. And if you can't give an absolute definition to something, how can you then talk about it and make sure people are aware of it?
Should we be more aware of it?
Yes. I think in the sense that we should all know what opportunities we should be open to, what's available.
As an employer, I could be interviewing a range of people, and we talked about before how those who may have had coaching in interview techniques could come in and sit before me and do a really good interview, and I might have someone who just crumbles in front of me and I think, not going to give them the job because they didn't do very well. But it could be because they've never had any guidance in that at all. So actually, that's the sort of area where actually, for me, people should be aware of it, because it may impact the decisions that I make, and I could hold people back because I'm judging them on something that actually they have unfairly had advantages or disadvantages.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know I said we're going to possibly talk about guiding, but I am currently working on a national project where we're redeveloping the young leader qualification. And as part of that, we have a young leader working group, which was sourced from all the guides and young leaders from across the country. They applied for the role. And when we got together for the first time, I remember asking my project manager afterwards, like, do we know what their backgrounds are? Because there is definitely a lack of diversity in terms of your social mobility or you're disadvantaged. Now, again, that could be because those young people didn't know that opportunity existed. Those young people may not have felt confident enough to apply for that kind of role. And how do you do it? It's a vicious circle of, it comes down to, if the parents have been really proactive and can see those opportunities. So the education needs to go so wide. I mean, it's your parents, it's your employers, it's it's your local government. But then again, you're trying to change a nation and how we work. So yeah, and yeah, that's a magic wand kind of expectation.
How do you reflect on your own contributions to this massive area of work, the work that you have done?
I don't. I don't reflect on them. I just do it. I do it because I've loved working in and around education, and whatever impact I might have had is just a consequence of me doing my job. And I think if I actually genuinely thought about it deep, then I probably wouldn't want to go to work, because I'd be so upset and traumatized by what I'm not doing, what I'm not able to achieve.
What about you were on TV? You featured on the BBC documentary Growing Up Gifted with Liam, who wanted to be
Well,
a doctor. Is that right?
yeah. Well, I didn't appear in the end, did I? They cut me out of everything.
Did they?
How dare they? Yes, I didn't appear once.
Well,
So,
we won't be cutting you out the podcast.
yeah. So, despite being followed around and doing all sorts of really random things,
Oh,
I never actually it was never actually included in it. But yeah, Liam was a brilliant example of somebody who would really who benefited from those experiences. My rightly or wrongly, my biggest concern with Liam was he wanted to be a chef when I first met him, and then because he was good at science, there was somebody had said to him, "Oh, have you thought about being a doctor?" Which set him on a trajectory that was incredibly challenging. And I don't mean because of his disadvantaged background, because the amount the A levels that he would have had to take and the grades he was going to have to get. Whereas there's a part of me always wishes that we could have focused in on being a chef, and he could have been because social mobility doesn't mean we've all got to be doctors and lawyers. I mean, if we're all doctors and lawyers, who's going to be our chefs?
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was brilliant and he had so much potential. But unfortunately, I have no idea what he went on to do after his GCSEs.
So true, because I think again it's all about careers advice, isn't it? And about what you can do in life. It's such a at school. I mean, this is back in my day, which is a long time ago now, but it was such a limited pool of like jobs you could do. I had no idea about all of the other stuff I could do with my time. And again, a chef, you could run your own business as a chef. You could do all sorts of there's loads of different work you could do as a chef. It's not.
Yeah,
It sounds like it's one
absolutely.
thing, but actually, there's so many path you can go down as someone who loves food and loves cooking, and you're not aware of that when you're 13, 14, 15.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, there are schools do have an obligation to provide careers advice, but I think a lot of careers advice comes from those around us. So it is your teachers and it's your parents and it's people that you pass in the street. And we have to be so careful because yes, Liam was good at his sciences, but even if he was good at sciences, there are so many other professions related to science that might have been an option.
Yeah, being a doctor isn't the only science thing.
Yeah. And some that actually probably would lead to way better opportunities than going into medicine. So we have to be really careful as adults and in employment for giving that advice out, so that we don't then narrow people's perceptions of what's available to them. Because, and I mean, I know I keep saying this, but it comes down to opportunities and keeping doors open. But I do wonder if we'd stuck on the chef route, whether he could have been in completely college by now and could have been really like cooking up a storm, literally.
How do you think listeners can be part of the change when it comes to social mobility and improving equal opportunities for all, regardless of background? What could somebody listening do?
So I think, and this is coming from our World of Work project, is can you spare an hour or two to go into a school and either talk about your career or do a mock interview or just interact with the young people in some way, shape, or form, because that's where they start to get their information from. It's the people that they interact with. And if you're really proactive, can you be a governor, or can you offer work experience, or those kind of things? So it's not necessarily taking up lots of time. It might be that you literally give up a day's worth of work. And a lot of places actually have volunteering opportunities within the workplace. So they encourage their staff to go out and volunteer. So I think that would be my key one. It doesn't cost anything to give up 2 hours to go and sit in a mock interview. Help that young person develop their confidence, because that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? It's like, can they confidently talk to somebody else? So please, yes, help with work experience and mock interviews and those kind of things.
We're going to take a pause there. If you'd like to hear more from Katrina Moffat, in part 2 we'll be exploring the world of Girl Guiding, an organisation she's volunteered for nearly 20 years. How are they working to make positive change for the futures of the young women who attend? Until then, thank you for listening to The Changemakers. Please subscribe or leave us a review if you've enjoyed what you've heard so far. You can find us on Instagram too, @TheChangemakersPod. This has been The Changemakers.